All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, about a month ago, I delivered a radar asking whether President Biden had already peaked. Now, he did a good job with vaccines. He got a relief bill passed. But the rest of the agenda seemed to be stalled and hamstrung, primarily because Democrats had handcuffed themselves with fealty to the Senate parliamentarian, current Senate rules, and a lack of imagination on executive action. And in fact, as we approach the Memorial Day holiday, Biden's efforts do seem to be fall short of his promises. He promised progress on police reform by the anniversary of George Floyd's death. That anniversary is today, and the opposite of progress has been made. Biden quietly dismantled a police oversight commission, and Democrats just pushed through a bill to fund the Capitol Police to the tune of billions of dollars. On infrastructure, Biden had promised progress by Memorial Day, but he's still messing around in fake meetings with Republicans who will never, ever support the tax hikes that Democrats want to use to pay for the bill. The rest of the social welfare items, from daycare subsidies to universal pre-K to a longer-term extension of the child tax credit, they're not even being seriously worked on right at this moment. That's to say nothing of the many campaign pledges which were just quietly discarded. According to reporting from Jeff Stein, Biden's budget proposal is not even going to bother to include key priorities from the trail, including a public option on health care, student debt relief, increasing the estate tax, or even prescription drug reforms. Now, each one of these items is wildly popular and could be accomplished if Biden just had the will to do it. Negotiating lower prescription drug prices is literally one of the most popular things you could possibly do. Meanwhile, H.R. 1, which was billed as an essential democracy-protecting bill, has just quietly slid from view with seemingly no hope of passage. Republicans, of course, have no such hesitation in manipulating election rules to benefit their party in the midterms. They've pushed a raft of restrictive voting laws through state legislatures as prominent stop-the-steal conspiracy theorists run to be top election officials. So what is going on here? Why is Biden, in spite of actually seemingly wanting to meet the moment, so abjectly incapable of doing so? There's a lot of potential explanations that we've talked about here before, which I do think have merit. One of those is the type of soft corruption which addles the brains of nearly everyone in Washington, causing them to pay way too much attention to the priorities of corporate interests and the donor class. Another is Biden's longtime ideological fetish of bipartisanship and moderation. But I've been considering another possibility lately, which is, what if Biden's supposed greatest strength, the wisdom that he has from a lifetime spent in high political office, what if that is actually a tremendous liability? What if, in a moment of tremendous change and upheaval as we're living through right now, wisdom drawn from years in an archaic system is actually a complete disaster? So bear with me here on a brief detour, guys. In Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, he discusses research on exactly what happens in the brain when you're on psychedelics. Essentially, the part of your brain that controls all of your prior expectations quiets down. Rather than filtering the raw data entering your brain through the lens of your preconceived notions, you instead just take in that raw data as an infant would, drinking through the fire hose of your senses and their interactions with the world. Now, as a good example of how this works, Pollan talks about a simple test that you can perform. Take a look at this rotating mask. It's a normal convex human face on one side, and it rotates to reveal the concave backside of the mask. Except, our brains are so used to seeing a convex face with the nose protruding outward that they immediately correct the visual data, transforming the raw data of a concave, inward-bending face to the normal convex face that we have seen millions of times. Just watch that. Now, young children, people with certain types of significant mental illness, and people on psychedelics defeat the brain-created illusion, seeing the concave back of the mask as it actually appears. Now, that's a mind-blowing fact that begs the question of whether those who are tripping might actually be seeing the world more accurately in certain ways than the sober mind that we place so much trust in. Now, there's a very good reason why in normal life, just working off that fire hose of raw data is not an ideal way to live. It's extremely helpful to have rules of thumb, expectations, prior assumptions that help you survive the day without constantly reevaluating everything. Taking in each new piece of information as if totally novel. To live in this way would be completely overwhelming and wildly impractical. But it's also true that you can be too hardened, too inflexible in your preconceptions, too certain, too rigid, too stuck in your ways. Pollan makes a profound point about how to think about wisdom in light of this revelation. Now, having a lot of experience, it can be a wonderful thing because it basically means you've seen it all. You're not going to be surprised by anything. You got a ready answer for almost anything life or particular field of work might throw at you. But there's a downside to this wisdom, too. It can lead to ossified thinking and an inability to see novel solutions or even just the reality in front of you. To put it simply, you can get stuck in your ways. Now, I've been thinking about the dangers of this type of wisdom in the current moment. This past year alone, we saw a global pandemic, an economic crash, the largest protest movement in history, and of course the election of a president who is wildly different from the previous occupant. The central theme of this show has, of course, been the tumult of our time, a tumult created by the collapse of an old neoliberal order and the lack of a cogent system to replace it. And yet, the guy who's in the White House came of age in Washington 50 years ago. When Joe Biden was forming his political consciousness and laying down his priors, neoliberalism was the new kid on the block, kicking out the old New Deal order. And as I watch him operate and stumble now on a 10% complete agenda, I can't help but think that one of the primary things holding him back is the wisdom he's accumulated over all those many years. No matter how much the rotating mask of Washington reveals a Republican Party with zero interest in working with him, a sclerotic system that is actually destroying democracy rather than preserving it, and a rejected world order that is being tossed down around the globe, Biden's brain is still going to continue to conjure the time when he started in politics, a time before parties had fully sorted along ideological lines, when neoliberalism was all the rage, when a left-right moderate axis made a lot more sense than it frankly does right now. Biden's years of accumulated wisdom, they're destroying his presidency. Even if he and the rest of the ossified Washington establishment and liberal commentariat will never be able to see it. And Sagar, there's been a trend over the past, decade or so, where voters increasingly, they don't care about experience.
No.
At really less and less.
Why is Andrew Yang leading the New York City primary?
Right, and Biden is a throwback to a time when people looked at the resume and they evaluated the experience, et cetera, et cetera. And part of what I realized in thinking about this research is that maybe the voters are onto something. When you have a time of tremendous change where things are rapidly evolving, having ossified experience in an old order, that's not just not helpful, it can actually really hinder you in adjusting to the circumstances as they exist today. They can blind you to the reality of what's happening in the country, in the world. They can blind you to new and novel solutions that might be offered to fix those things. And so as I was looking at, Biden's really kind of gone off the tracks now, something that we predicted might happen after the initial, really obvious moves of get everybody vaccinated, get relief checks out the door. After that, it's just kind of crumbling away from him, and he's stuck in these bipartisan negotiations. You're going, you all can't even agree on what infrastructure is. What are you doing right now? Getting hamstrung by Joe Manchin, getting hamstrung by the rules of the Senate. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking, and less of his agenda looks likely to make any progress at all.
I don't think anything else is going to pass. I mean, maybe I'm just a complete cynic, unless maybe on one more reconciliation. I think
some kind of infrastructure through reconciliation.
One more reconciliation, maybe. And even then, with Manchin and Sinema and all of that, what it looks like on the other side, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think what you're getting at, which is that we've had two problems, and there's this theory of presidential politics that everything is about reactions. So, Obama is the ultimate opposite of Bush, Trump is the ultimate opposite of Obama, and Biden is the ultimate opposite of Trump.
Yeah.
And there was something to that. You go and you think about, why did people vote Trump in 2016? A lot of people who did not like him. He was historically unpopular. Well, you know what? It's just something different. And whatever's been working hasn't been working for me. And so then Biden comes around and they're like, well, this is a little bit more than I signed up for, so we're going here. Biden is a very transitional figure. In many ways, I don't blame him because I think he's doing exactly what he told us to do. He always said nothing will fundamentally change. He said, I'm a transitional figure to some whatever terrible politics. He doesn't believe in transformation. And no matter how much, FDR and all that other stuff is on his thing, that's just completely not who or what he is. And maybe that is what the country needed right now. The question is just what comes next and what is he building or not and what is going to replace that order? And that is where the real ultimate question, you solve that question, you're going to win, 400 electoral votes or whatever.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
the problem is that in our ossified system, what is the problem? Yes, Biden may be ossified. You know who's even more ossified? Republican Party. And they've got a Trump albatross hanging around their neck talking about how the election was stolen. So how are they going to beat Biden? So then it doesn't matter, right? So then you have in the two-party system, or the doom loop, as Lee Drutman calls it, you have it so that, you have this minority party of 44, 45% of the country. Not enough to win an election. Every once in a while you can win a presidential based upon the Electoral College. The rest of the time, the Democrats are going to basically do whatever they want. And if you look at almost every one-party state in this country, it does not function as well as those which are purple, because purple states generally at least have a significant more of a check on their government with flip-flops and more.
There's some competition there.
Exactly, there's
least.
some competition.
Yeah.
And if you look, California is a great example. A lot of deep blue and a lot of deep red states are horrible in their administration for exactly this reason. So I think that introducing some sort of competition or outside checks on the system is the most important thing. And I don't currently believe there's anybody who works in politics who can do that, who is a professional politician. Almost all of them are swallowed up. AOC, I don't even know what the hell happened to her. The rest of the people in the squad, it's good luck. Most of you are just Democratic Party apparatchiks. On the right, at the end of the day, for all of talk of the new right, everybody votes with Mitch McConnell. Mm-hmm. So you need somebody who is completely out of the system, I think, in order to shake that up. And that's why I think it's The Rock, but that's a whole other story.
Well, this puts some science behind kind of why people are drawn to outsiders. It's not just this reflexive, non-thinking thing. I mean, I do think it comes from the gut and is sort of instinctive, but it's also not foolish because you can see that the way things have been going, the system that Joe Biden came up in, helped to create all of that, is broken down. And there's just an instinctive understanding that someone who came up in that system and has built all of their worldview and the way that they see everything that's going on based on that system is never going to be the one to solve all the problems.
That's right.
All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.